Frank Zappa and Eric Bogosian, two unique and controversial artists, are the creators of Blood on the Canvas. The voices you just heard were all performed by Eric Bogosian, no stranger to the portrayal of low-life characters. Bogosian is well known for his one-man act Drinking in America, a theatrical probe into the American male psyche. And anyone who doesn't know Frank Zappa and his impact on culture and music in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s would have had to have been on some 30-year retreat in the Himalayas to have been bypassed by the Zappa era. Today, Zappa is one of the loudest voices protesting present-day attempts to restrict freedom of expression, whether it's on rock and roll albums or on MTV. In the production of Blood on the Canvas, Zappa and Bogosian complement each other's talent for cryptic production and writing styles. Bogosian wrote and acted in the production, while Zappa edited the script, directed and provided the music for the piece, as well as adding a sense of improvisation to the production. No one can accuse Blood on the Canvas of holding back any contempt for certain elements of American culture, but as Zappa and Bogosian told me shortly after finishing the production, American audiences sometimes need a blunt instrument in order to get the message.
It's drama, it's make-believe, and the make-believe and all of it is designed to irritate, turn gears, whatever, in the listener. It's a form of entertainment, but it's very stimulating as well. It's like Mad Magazine or something, or any kind of satire. It's extreme, but you have to. Extreme situations require extreme responses.
Well, if you take a look at the statistics on voter apathy and other types of apathy in the United States today, you have to admit that it's going to take something stronger than the Joan Rivers show, for example, to make them pay attention to any kind of a topic. You have to almost bang them over the head with a baseball bat just to get their attention. The extremeness of some of the things that are described in the show and the matter-of-fact way in which the extreme things are put forth is probably the only viable technique for communication of these types of ideas in the 80s.
It seems that all the characters you're bringing into this, the different characters you write about and you portray, is this an attack on each one of them? Is it an attack on radio, the radio industry, pornographers, the church, the entertainment industry?
Well, my approach usually, and we created these guys together because the things that these guys are saying is, we did this together. I mean, there were moments when we were recording when I actually had the headphones on and Frank would be in the control room and whispering the words into my ears as I was saying them, so he can also answer this. But from my perspective, no, I'm not attacking these guys individually. That would be kind of an easy shot for any, let's say, pornographers or something. I'm more interested in their underlying human traits that are very extreme, like greed or gluttony, something like this, that even underneath that there's something essentially wrong with all of these people. And whatever is essentially wrong with these people, the strange thing is that the listener in some way, and maybe not, but might identify slightly with these greasy characters. And that's the crux of the whole thing right there, is if you can feel sympathy with these people, if you feel like this world is sort of familiar to you, then what does that say about the world you live in, and how do you participate in it, etc. Well, if I watch a movie and there's something very violent in it, let's say a car gets blown up, and I kind of feel a little thrill in my body when the car gets blown up, even though I don't think cars should be blown up out on the streets all over the place, or there's something about it that I like, and that is something that's going through our entire culture right now, is people are getting vicarious thrill from, for instance, the news, which we bring up in this thing. Terrorism, it becomes kind of a sideshow for comfortable suburbanites to record on their VCRs, and nobody will say this out loud, but the fact of the matter is that the CBS Evening News is a serial that goes on every night and is a lot of fun to listen to, because nobody really feels touched by it. If Dan Rather came on every night and said, your mother just died, your son was just run over by a car, your dog was just flailed and thrown into your front yard, you'd turn it off in a second. But because he's saying what he's saying, and it's far away, we don't have to deal with it. And as our American culture becomes more and more decadent, this becomes our general posture, our pose, our mental position, which is a lazy and decadent one. What we're doing is we're just pushing it a little bit, we're just turning the dials a little bit so that the responses happen. People get they go, well, wait a minute, I'm not like that. I'm not a violent, horrible person. But you are. We all are. Somebody must be. Somebody picks up that pornography off the shelf of the store and takes it home. And well, I won't. We don't want to censor this show, so I won't go any further.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons why people have down this particular food chain have been offended by the show is because it does not spare the world of art. You know, there's criticism of the art world involved in this show, and since the thing was requested by an artistic institution, maybe that's one of the reasons why there's been problems. You know, the people who are involved in the periphery of the art world, all the pseudos that are dangling on the side waiting to clutch that plastic glass with the white wine in it, you know, they don't take very kindly to any negative references toward their involvement in the artistic process. Although everybody who earns money from making art usually winds up doing business with these creatures, it's still, there's no reason to play footsie with them. You know, if you're gonna do it, you got to call a spade and say who they are and what they do and what their real value is to the universe. A lot of these people who are involved in that fringoid part of the art world act as if they are making the art. You know, it is by their good graces and their ability to clutch that little plastic glass that anybody who will take a chance and put their butt on the line with a work of art exists at their whim, you know. Unfortunately, those people have been involved in some of the decisions to withhold the show or suggestions to tone the show down.
I want to get back a little bit to the piece again with Eric, and the reason for focusing on the performance artist. I'll bet a few bucks that there are a lot of people who don't know what a performance artist is. Why was that whole focus there?
He becomes kind of a symbol for a lot of other things here, but there's a number of reasons why we go in that direction. One, this is, as Frank said, this thing was created by MoCA, which is an art place and where performance artists have performed. I've often been labeled a performance artist, although I don't call myself one, and it's a very contempo character on the scene. Good person to have as not the protagonist, but one of the central people in this little story that we're telling. So he was a good guy to kind of stick in there. Plus, he is an artist, and he's the guy who makes the stuff. He's supposedly, you know, there's this myth in our society that the artist is this impassioned, suffering soul who tells us the truth about ourselves and whatnot. Well, of course, what happens to the performance artist in our little story is that he gets his butt blown off. And that's because, as we are both artists of a sort, we make our work and we find ourselves often at the rough end of the stick. It was a very interesting experience for me while I was working here to just talk with Frank about, you know, what it's like to be dealing with the big business interests that he's had to deal with over the past decade, putting out his work, and I'm going through that now with my work. And basically, they're out to shaft us every time they can, especially when it comes to this situation of freedom of speech and whatnot. That's another tough path to follow.
Eric Bogosian and Frank Zappa, the voice and the minds behind Blood on the Canvas. The production of Blood on the Canvas was originally commissioned for the public radio series The Territory of Art, a series of inventive audio productions, but the direct approach in language and substance of the piece sent up warning flags all over the nation's public radio system until the piece was finally scratched from the series. Even a limited run of the piece on a smaller number of less timid radio stations was abruptly canceled when the practical realities of the present regulatory and legal climate were considered both by stations and by the artists themselves. It's that regulatory climate, fostered in part by a commission in Washington chaired by Attorney General Edwin Meese, that has been the focus of a public campaign by Frank Zappa. Zappa and Bogosian, who originally participated in this interview, expecting it to air on public radio stations, discussed their frustrations with the rejection of Blood on the Canvas and its impact on freedom of expression.
As a nation, are we running that scared that a piece of tape, which is about 22 minutes long, is of such a threat to the Americans' mentality that you have to cushion the blow with all of the rest of this stuff? I mean, I find this thing, just the fact of doing this interview to rationalize the show, to be a pretty distressing thing to participate in. But it's nice talking with you, of course.
In fact, in order to understand what makes our show threatening at all, you have to be an adult in order to know what we're talking about half the time. I don't think if the idea is that a 4-year-old is turning on the radio and is going to be permanently mentally disabled because what they hear on this show there's just no way. It isn't going to happen. This whole thing is couched in very adult terms, and it's pretty. You have to be grown up to understand it. You have to be already involved in the dialogue of what we're getting at in order to get what we're talking about. Anybody can turn on the TV set at any given time, and I think that the people, unless you're telling us that people who listen to radio are a completely other group of people, and they're all these like very sweet little old ladies sitting at home listening to classical radio and they never watch television, but if you're being exposed to the mass media, TV and radio, you're going to hit a lot of things that are quote unquote strong. In fact, most of the things that you get exposed to are done with no premeditation to being critical about anything. I mean, we're trying to, in our own way, in our style, to make a commentary about some of the mores and fashions and things going on in our culture today. I mean, we're trying to be critical. We're not putting a detective show on where suddenly in the middle of a suspense story, a woman is being brutally raped, which I mean, I haven't been able to turn on TV lately and not see some kind of heavy rape scene, or certainly on the music videos, there's a lot of that stuff too, a lot of knives, a lot of girls in bikinis getting hacked up or about to be hacked up. I mean, that's all coming from no place. Nobody's censoring them.
You have to realize that all contemporary attacks on pornography, or what the religious right refers to as moral problems in the United States, are just political tools. Political tools used to ensconce a theocratic, fascistic kind of regime in the United States that really has no business existing in America. You know, Eric is he's a little bit milder on these people. I'm not. I am livid about it. I hate them, and I wish that people would think twice every time they hear a religious broadcaster and think about the type of damage that is being done to tender young minds when a man in a suave suit gets on there and starts trying to merchandise medieval mumbo-jumbo to impressionable Americans who have a feeling of loneliness and isolation, and the remedy for this is being provided by people who merely want to take their money and pose a great threat to the United States. And behind all of the attacks on free speech in the United States, if you scratch the surface just 1 millimeter, you're going to find somebody connected with one of these fundamentalist right-wing organizations. Now, they got the right to pray any way they want to. They can, believe the mumbo-jumbo at home, fine, fine, fine. But none of this should be ensconced in any kind of legislation that controls the religious beliefs or non-religious beliefs of the vast majority of the people who live in this country. And since they make a lot of noise, it puts terror into the hearts of the license holders. It often scares people who are station programmers, both in radio and television. It frightens publishers of books and magazines.
It's funny because a long time ago, I guess it was a couple of 100 years ago, Frank put out a song, and they were saying it can't happen here, and that refers to the whole, whether it has to do with communist Russia or it has to do with Nazi Germany, about it can't happen here in the United States. It's happening here. It's happening today. We have lunatics who are running this country, and all we're doing is being critical. We're just exercising free speech here. It's not.
It's consumer awareness.
But wouldn't you agree that it's being done, though, in language that most parents and most radio listeners are just not accustomed to?
Well, they're not accustomed to hearing it on the air, but let's be realistic about it. It's language that most of these people use in their everyday life. Let's look at some science. Nobody has yet proven that any of the language, any of the words used in this piece or any of the other things that go on the air are capable of making you turn into a social deviant when you hear it, or to send you to hell. There is no science to back this up. A word is not going to make you into a monster. And anybody who proposes this as a fact ought to be taken to task and said, prove it. You ought to offer $1 million reward for anybody who can prove you went to hell from hearing the F word or anything else. It's just not going to happen.
I guess the final question is the whole question of art itself. If someone were to ask you if this is art, how would you respond?
Okay, here's my definition of art. Art is determined by the frame. If you take anything and put a frame around it, depending on where the object, whatever it is, could be a crumpled piece of paper glued to a piece of cardboard. If you stick a frame around it and you put it on the wall in a gallery, it's art. And that's unfortunate, because the object itself, in order to be deemed art, winds up being certified by a spectrum of nincompoops who get to frame it. And that's what determines art. So, I would say this show is art. I hereby certify it as art. I'm deeming it art. I'm framing it art. You can disagree with me. This show is art. There it goes. Now, if you guys have enough balls to put this show on the air, good for you. If it doesn't go on the air, it's a loss.
Frank Zappa and Eric Bogosian, creators of Blood on the Canvas. By the way, at the time this cassette was produced, there were no radio stations who were willing to take the risk of airing Blood on the Canvas. This tape production was a collaboration between the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles and WGBH Boston. For MoCA, executive producer Julie Lazar, senior producer Steve Rath. For WGBH, Ellen Kraft, executive producer. I'm Greg Fitzgerald.